So our keynote speaker today is Monica Duran. State Representative Monica Duran is currently serving her second term as Majority Leader, the #2 leadership position in the Colorado House of Representatives. She represents House District 23 in Jefferson County. Monica grew up watching her mother march alongside Cesar Chavez and Dolores Herrata fighting for better working conditions, fair wages, and the right to unionize. As a young adult, she took on a very personal battle as a domestic violence survivor and a once homeless single mom of one young son. During her 30-plus years in the dental industry, Monica became invested in helping vulnerable members of the community. In 2015, she led the campaign for Wheat Ridge Issue 300, a grassroots effort to push back against out-of-control development. She then served on the Wheat Ridge City Council and as director of the Wheat Ridge Fire Protection Board. She also served on the Jefferson Center for Mental Health Board and the Wheat Ridge Planning Commission. I don't know how she ever found time to breathe with all the different commitments she was in. Since being elected to the House of Representatives in 2018, she has been a champion for working families, survivors of domestic violence, missing and murdered Indigenous people, and animal welfare. As a responsible gun owner, she has led the way in common sense gun laws. As Majority Leader, she has played a role in legislation impacting nearly every facet of life, from climate change to education to affordable housing. We are so pleased to welcome you, Majority Leader Duran.
Good morning. Can you hear me and see me?
There we go. Welcome, Monica.
Great. Thank you so much, Honorable Nancy Todd, Honorable Sue Ryden. What an amazing group of women here this morning. I am so grateful to be here. Thank each and every one of you for your work in advocating, for the issues that matter to our communities. It's so important. Your voices, your advocacy matters inside and outside the Capitol, and I need you to know that and to hear me when I say that. I'm honored to join you for your Public Policy Day. My name is Monica Duran. I'm State Representative for House District 23, elected by my Democratic colleagues to be Majority Leader of the House. I represent Wheat Ridge, which includes parts of Lakewood, Applewood, Mountain View, and Lakeside. But before I became a representative and Majority Leader of the Colorado House, I was and always will be a survivor of domestic violence. I'm a survivor, not a victim, I often say. Through resilience and strength, I stand before you today. I'd like to share a little bit of my story with you. At 19, I married my high school sweetheart. After getting married, we had a son together who filled our home with such joy, laughter, and purpose. But things weren't happy for long. My husband's secret drinking habits began taking its toll. He became verbally and emotionally abusive, and over time, he became physically abusive. When the physical and emotional abuse didn't work, he often threatened me with his gun. This once young, vibrant woman, full of life, began to live in fear, shame, and isolation. This went on for several years. I remember the night that changed my life forever. I was able to plan my escape. It was a cold, rainy Valentine's night, and I had spent most of the afternoon in the kitchen cooking a wonderful family dinner. However, when my husband got home that evening, things took a turn. The sound of his booming voice made me shake uncontrollably. I knew what was coming next. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see him pulling out his gun like he often did to scare and intimidate me. All I could think of was my little boy crying in the next room as this man threatened to end both our lives, threatening everything I held dear. What kept going through my mind was, how was I going to keep my son safe? How could I possibly protect him against this out of control madman holding a gun. Things weren't supposed to be this way. It was looking into my son's eyes where I saw a future that I wanted for us. And I finally had the strength and the courage to break my silence. After that night, I told my parents, my friends, anyone who would listen to me. With their help, my son and I made our escape. While leaving my abuser was a massive feat, it wasn't the end of my journey. There was still plenty to overcome. After I escaped, I struggled to make ends meet as a single mom. Navigating the complicated judicial system was challenging. I had to sit through countless hearings, meetings, and phone calls, resounding my abuse over and over again, which continued to perpetrate the trauma. Not only did I have to face a complicated and re-traumatizing judicial system, I also faced financial insecurity. In addition to physical abuse, he also controlled other aspects of my life. It became nearly impossible to be financially independent. In those early days, I lived paycheck to paycheck, working myself to the bone to put food on the table for myself and my young son. In those early days, I relied on a domestic violence shelter for housing and to keep us safe. Unfortunately, survivors are limited in how long they can utilize domestic violence shelters. While the staff may have wanted us to stay, we needed to relinquish our beds for other survivors. When it was our turn to leave, I didn't have a consistent place to stay, bouncing from place to place and couch to couch. I was at my rock bottom that I found victim services, a place where advocates, many survivors like myself, worked to assist me in navigating the judicial system, providing me with resources, and being in my corner, my team. This changed my life forever. My confidence grew because I had victim services behind me. They were waiting and ready to help me achieve financial security, provide childcare when my son couldn't join me for various meetings and hearings, and when I had to work. Even with an eviction on my record, they assisted me in finding stable and supportive housing, trauma counseling, and much more. Through resiliency, fight, and courage and strength, I speak before you today as House Majority Leader. After I escaped my abuser and moved to Colorado and began life the way I wanted, not the way my abuser always wanted, I was surrounded by love, warmth, and once more, finding strength to speak and connect with my family and friends. I raised my son in a positive environment, knowing we broke the cycle of abuse and fought against stigmas to get where we are today. We had survived, but I found myself questioned when I found strength to share my story. Why didn't you leave sooner? Why didn't you tell your family? It was why? It took strength to break down those stigmas, and I still face them today. Soon after I moved, I began a career in dentistry and worked for 3 decades in the industry, including a dental practice here in Jeffco. But in the back of my mind, I always knew I wanted to use my lived experience to help other survivors through policy. That knowledge and passion for change fueled me to get involved in local politics and foster my own change. In 2025, as you heard, I was the leader of a campaign in Wheat Ridge called Issue 300, which was a grassroots organization of citizens pushing back against out-of-control corporate development that would have run local businesses out of town. I then served on Wheat Ridge City Council as a director of the Wheat Ridge Fire Protection Board. My work in the community also included serving on the board of Jefferson Center for Mental Health, the Wheat Ridge Planning Commission, and serving on the board of Porchlight Family Justice Center. I am also a proud member of the Jefferson County Democratic Latino Initiative. The political light inside me had only just begun to glow. After spending 3 years on city council, I was inspired to run for state office. When I decided to run for representative, I knew this was the right path for me. After a tough primary, I was thrilled to win my election in 2018 and began my first term as representative the following year. My election was a landmark election, not only for me personally, but for the entire Latino community. I was the first Latina ever elected to represent House District 23. And as soon as I got elected, I knew I had to get to work. I knew firsthand if people in tough situations saw a fellow survivor like myself in the State House, it would all be worth it. I knew just my presence alone was enough to challenge the stigma and encourage other survivors to have a voice of their own. Little did I know, my statewide political journey was just beginning. Leading up to my first session in 2019 and afterwards, I met with people in domestic violence, sexual assault, and other inexcusable crime spaces and learned that funding was a major problem. In fact, there was never enough money to go around, which means people are left without the crucial services they need, not only to get by, but barely to survive. I often thought of my struggle in those early days after leaving my abuser. Without victim services to lean on, who knows where I would have ended up. Something needed to be done. Funding that victim services heavily rely on, VOCA, has steadily decreased from nearly 57 million in 2018 to a low of 18 million in 2021 and an estimated 12 million in 2024. Having consistent funding streams is essential for our crime victim services and for the Victim Assistance and Law Enforcement Fund, also known as VAIL. They play a big role. Cuts to VAIL and VOCA have caused devastating effects. This means less resources available to victims and the inability to hire and maintain staff. Cuts like these mean more victim services centers are closing, making it harder and harder to access the few centers that remain open, especially in rural and underserved communities. When I learned this, I took it to heart. I made it one of the top priorities for me in the legislature. We needed to secure more funding just to keep the doors open. People's lives were counting on us. Knowing all this, in 2021, I passed a law which created necessary access to medical care for forensic examinations of victims' strangulation. I also passed a monumental law which allocated 15 million of federal pandemic relief funding towards victim assistance services and resources. This law was a critical step towards supporting victim services, especially during COVID's difficult economic time. But we knew it wasn't enough. In 2022, I passed a law which backfilled funding to ensure the continuation of accessible services as VOCA dollars dwindled. My work under the Golden Dome didn't stop there. I continue to be a fierce advocate for survivors of crime. I spearheaded a law that required municipal courts to follow the Colorado Victims Act when handling domestic violence cases and increased data tracking. Last year, when we revisited the lack of funding for victims of crime, including domestic violence and sexual assault, I worked tirelessly on passing a law that allowed us to put Prop KK on the ballot. Thank you to the voters of Colorado for approving. It will impose a modest 6.5% excise tax on firearm and ammunition manufacturers to fund mental health services for veterans, at-risk youth, crime victims, and school safety. With the kickoff of 2025 session, I'm excited for policies to come that will support survivors of violence and protect women's health. A bill coming this session that I am proud to co-sponsor and support will provide protections for victims of economic abuse. Economic abuse occurs in 98% of abusive relationships and is often the biggest barrier women face when attempting to leave a relationship. Many survivors have to battle coerced debt, which is debt incurred by an abuser in their partner's name by fraud, manipulation, and threats. Coerced debt can ruin a survivor's credit score and stop them from accessing housing, jobs, and loans. Survivors will tell you economic abuse is one of the most powerful deterrents to leaving an abusive partner. This monumental policy will support many survivors by requiring consumer reporting agencies to reinvestigate disputed information free of charge if it is alleged to be the result of economic abuse or coerced debt. Additionally, it will mandate agencies to delete inaccurate information, revise the file, and refrain from reporting such information in future credit reports. On top of all that, the bill will prohibit debt collectors from collecting debts identified as a result of an identity theft or coerced debt, further protecting survivors. Another key provision in the bill is to expand the definition of coercion in civil protection orders to include economic abuse, and coerce debt and empower survivors to challenge debts and provide mechanisms for legal recourse. My goal is to ensure that survivors have the tools they need to start over. I look forward to seeing more legislation introduced and to see what comes this session to continue the support and the uplifting of women's rights. While we have made monumental strides in preventing violence against women, including domestic violence and sexual assault, there is still a long way to go. My heart breaks every time a new report shows an increase of domestic violence. Last year, a report revealed that while violent crime is decreasing in Denver, domestic violence is up by 4%. As an elected official, as a survivor, as a mom, and as a grandmother, this is personal for me. We must do everything in our power to support additional services and funding for survivors. They are counting on us. My journey is far from over, and without people like you who advocate every day for policies addressing violence against women, I don't know where we would be today. I encourage you to follow my work as well as my colleagues' work at the state capitol. Continue to bring your voice by testifying or connecting with your state representative, and fight the good fight, because you never know who is watching. It could be the next generation of advocates and feminists like ourselves. Just like my early days in politics, my door is always open if you have any potential policy ideas or just want to chat. Thank you again for having me, hearing my story, and for all the work you do to support women's equity and the protection of our rights, and for all of you who have carved out the path for us to have a voice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. Honorable Duran. I am just almost speechless hearing your presentation. I know there are going to be some questions that people have. Please make sure that you've put them in the Q&A, and even if you have them for later, they can come back. And if you will, please put your contact information in the chat room. That would be awesome, and then people could contact you if they need further information. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Darcy, because I know she has the questions and is monitoring that.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Majority Leader Duran, for that presentation. I'm Darcy Juday. I'm co-director of AAUW Colorado Public Policy, and I am also the branch public policy chair for Longmont. And I want to give a shout out to Longmont because we have 25% of our membership here today. And thank the rest of you for making such a good turnout as well. Please continue to add your questions in the Q&A, and let's get to a first one. This is from Jane Miller. She says, abusers often prevent their victims from having contact with the world outside the home. How will abused women learn about your new law that will help them if they're victims of financial abuse?
Thank you for that question. We have a lot of amazing advocates here today that when we pass these laws, they share them within their networks. So there's many ways to, education is an important part of this and getting that word out too. So we rely on our advocates. We rely on different agencies and organizations to help us get that word out. And we all talk about it, right? We all share with each other. We communicate. We build that knowledge out there. So that's really what we rely on right now for each of us to share with the advocates we work with within our communities and our districts, and connecting with all them. And that's how we share what we are doing.
Thank you. Peggy Leach wants to know, has this year's, and Peggy is from League of Women Voters, has this year's economic abuse protections bill been introduced yet, or when will you introduce it?
It has not been introduced yet, but it should be. It's within the top 5 of a member, so it should be coming soon.
Great. And Cheryl Spratz wants to know, would you define again for us what coerced debt is?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. So it's what an abuser will do, whether it's taking out a loan in in their partner's name, right? It could be a loan, anything to do with even access to a bank account, right? Like for me, in my instance, when I went to take out money because I needed it, obviously, all the money was withdrawn. So that's exactly what when I'm talking about when it comes to coerced debt, is getting in debt, whether that is a loan, a credit card, whatever that might be, but it's also in the name of the victim, and then they end up being responsible for that. And time again, since I've been at the legislature, this has been a huge obstacle and an issue, because there hasn't been a definition of coercion in the statute. So there's been nothing you could really do. So we are really hoping this policy gets passed, it gets signed, and that's just another tool in order to be able to start your life over, right? Not having bad credit, not being responsible for something your abuser has done. I hope that was helpful, and happy to talk more or connect offline too.
Yes, thank you. Teresa Smith would like to know, could you briefly speak to how anonymous reporting to Child Protective Services can be used to terrorize and abuse mothers?
Yeah, I think speaking for myself and my personal experience, in my situation, my abuser had wanted to have custody of our youngest son, even though, everything that he had done. So when you try to report, it's really tough when you try to report this abuse by the abuser. Lots of times that is flipped and turned to the victim. It's complicated. It's I know that there's a difficult process to try to say, wait a minute, it's not me that's doing this. It's actually my abuser. It's a struggle. What I am grateful and appreciative for is we have come a long way. Now we can talk about it. When I went through it, you didn't dare talk about it. It was such a stigma. It still is today, but we have advocates like all of you. We've got different organizations. We've educated and done a lot of educating out there from the state of Colorado in the legislature to connect, right, with community, to share, to get that out there. So I think, I'm sorry, I'm trying to read what's in the chit chat at the same time. Anyway, it's tough, but I think if we keep talking about this, we keep passing policies that really give us the strength and the tools to make a difference, we can. And it's really making sure that judges are also educated and are aware that these things happen. So it really is a process, but we'll continue to build on.
Thank you. Linda Davies wants to know, what's the age and demographic of women reporting domestic violence?
Thank you for that question. And to be honest, I don't know exactly. I could probably guess, but there might be somebody who's on this Zoom that may have that data.
Okay, we'll listen further.
Great.
Oh, and one more thing about your proposed bill. Gail Wilson wants to know, is there organized opposition to your bill?
I am not aware of any right now. Doesn't mean something that won't come up, but I haven't heard anything. But once a bill is introduced, that's when, it becomes public, people are aware, but I haven't heard of any in the conversations we've had.
Okay, let's switch the questions to national and talk about how the new legislation might affect you. First, after this, and this is from Jane Miller, after a few weeks into the 2025 session, what's the current atmosphere between, in the Colorado legislature, between the majority Democrats and the minority Republicans? Are you optimistic that they can work cooperatively, or is this going to be a year of standoffs for you?
Great question. I'm always optimistic that we are going to be able to collaborate in the places we can. And obviously, we have a lot of issues and policies that are going to be coming up where we're not going to find that common ground. I think and feel that because of the national election, they feel somewhat empowered because of that. And, we're going to continue to do what we do as Democrats, right? There's 43 of us. We've got policies that great policies that we have passed. We want to make sure we protect those. So we're focusing on protecting those policies, whether that's immigration, whether that's LGBTQ, whether that's reproductive rights. We're going to stand strong. And the people of Colorado in the election in November said that they value and appreciate the work we have done as legislators, and that's what we're going to continue to do. So as you know, we may have opposition, we may have what we normally have every session. We are focused on what the people of Colorado elected us to do and are asking us to do here. So just know we're going to do our best, and we've got some good policies coming, protections coming to make sure that we step up and answer what's coming on the national level.
Thank you. I have two more questions for you. One is, how do you expect the new national administration to affect your advocacy efforts? And are there things laws Colorado can pass to offset that?
Those are things we're looking at and have been since the election in November as a legislature. We've created working groups to address different pieces of policy to kind of look in and connect with community advocates to see where are there loopholes, what do we need to strengthen. So it's a work in progress. So I just want you to know that, you know, we understand what may be coming, but nationally, however, we don't know exactly yet because some of that just kind of played out this last week. So we are looking, as I said, we've done some amazing work here and provided protections in the state of Colorado. We want to make sure we keep those. So each day we're keeping track. We're following what's coming down nationally, and we will unite. We are united, and we are strong, and we are determined to make sure that the protections we have put in the state stay. And just know that that's what we're going to do for you.
We're very hopeful.
Yes.
My final question is from Blythe Toussaint. And she asks, I know you addressed this in your talk, but she'd like you to reiterate, if we're interested in acting individually to help, what are some of the most important and impactful things that we can do?
Oh, that's a great question. I think you can always, like I said, reach out to your representative. You can always email them. You can call them, get involved in either testifying. If there is a policy, right, that's coming, is going to be in committee. What's so great is we offer remote testimony. So if it's not convenient to come down to the Capitol, which it's tough, people are working, right? You can do remote testimony. And I think that is, you know, those are some of the best things you can do is just reach out, make sure your voice is heard, get involved in your local community too, with different issues that are coming up. City council, right? All of these ways I think locally to get involved matter. And it's just doing events like you're doing here, coming to town halls. Those are important as well. So any way you can connect with your elected officials from local level up to the state, you should do. You're on mute, Darcy.
And here I was doing so well. I appreciate,
awesome.
appreciate your responses so much. And I'm going to turn this over to Nancy Todd again.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Darcy. Great questions, great involvement. And gosh, you know, I feel so confident in terms of what we have just heard from you, Monica, and your leadership. I've seen you in action. I know that your passion and your honesty and your integrity is a real gift to the state of Colorado. So we thank you for your service. We thank you for your time and for your passion. And we are most confident that you will continue to lead the Democrats and the state of Colorado for the House of Representatives. And we thank you for your time this morning.